In ancient Rome, gladiatorial combats were far more brutal than modern sports. Unlike a football match or any other sport, gladiatorial games often ended with the death of one of the combatants. However, not all fights concluded with a death. When a gladiator was defeated and lay in the arena, the victorious gladiator did not always deliver a fatal blow immediately. Instead, he waited for a signal to determine the fate of his opponent. Jean-Léon Gérome's painting, Pollice Verso, perfectly portrays this scene, where one gladiator has defeated another and looks to the crowd, awaiting the gesture that will decide whether he spares or ends his adversary's life. In this painting, we see the entire crowd giving the thumbs down gesture, but what does this gesture actually mean? Are they really telling him to end the life of his opponent? Movies like Gladiator took inspiration from this painting for one of their most famous scenes. However, I can tell you that even the director of this movie made a mistake with this gesture. In today's video, I will explain the true significance of the thumbs in ancient Rome and analyze this painting in depth to understand how Jean-Léon Gérome, with this small detail, led the whole world to misunderstand the true meaning of this gesture. Let's begin. Pollice Verso falls within academicism, characteristic of the 19th century. Within this movement, the most prestigious form of academicism was history painting, a genre in which artists depicted historical events with more or less fidelity. Regarding the origin of gladiatorial combats, their exact antecedents are unknown. However, some researchers suggest that they originated in the Campania region and could be related to the duels of the great Trojan heroes. Fortunately, we have records documenting what appears to be the first gladiatorial combat in Rome, which occurred in 264 BC. This fight was held in honor of Junius Brutus Pera and took place during his funeral. At that time, it was common for the funerals of important people to include special events, and in this case, it was a gladiatorial combat. From that moment on, these types of combats began to generalize in the funerary rites of the Roman aristocracy, giving rise to the munus gladiatorum, which means gladiatorial duty. This term refers to the obligation to organize gladiatorial combats as part of funeral rites. Over time, these fights evolved and became a spectacle in their own right, independent of funerals. The Munera Gladiatoria became very popular public events, organized by political leaders and emperors to gain the favor of the people and to showcase their power and generosity. In this context, Gerome painted one of the most controversial scenes of the time, showing a group of gladiators in the arena of the amphitheater. Standing and occupying almost the center of the composition, a large murmillo places his foot on the neck of the defeated gladiator, a retiarius. The murmillo looks toward the emperor, awaiting the verdict, while the audience clamors for the defeated's end with their thumbs turned down. It seems that here lies the widespread misconception that this gesture meant the death of the defeated, and conversely, a thumbs up would save his life. But let's leave this topic for a little later and return to the painting. Perhaps the most striking aspect of the entire scene is the colorful building. Erroneously, until relatively recently, it was believed that both classical architecture and sculpture were pristine white. Nothing could be further from the truth. This misconception arose for several reasons. One was the discovery of many classical sculptures that emerged without any traces of color. The Renaissance and later Neoclassicism took these figures as models, replicating not only the prototypes but also those smooth white surfaces devoid of any color. This absence of color could be due to the fact that, having been buried for so long, the paint layers disappeared, leaving no trace. Or, being intended for outdoor display, the weather could have erased those traces, so that when they were eventually buried over the years, they presented a colorless surface. Thanks to discoveries in Pompeii and Greece, especially during the 19th century, it became evident that both buildings and sculptures were painted in quite vivid colors. Knowing this, it is not surprising that Gerome used such bright reds on the wall of the amphitheater, a very fitting color considering the main activities that took place in that venue. Additionally, despite the errors in the scene, the painter conducted extensive research to be as faithful as possible to what he was depicting. Look at the audience. They are treated with such realism that we can almost hear the shouts calling for either the salvation or condemnation of the defeated, depending on their preference or bet. Pollice Verso also perfectly depicts the various social classes and the hierarchy that prevailed in Roman society, which was reflected in the seating arrangements at such spectacles. The elites sat in the area closest to the arena. Conversely, the lower you were on the social scale, the higher up you sat during these events. A special mention goes to the women, who had to sit in the higher section, Summa Cavia, except for the Vestals, who occupied a privileged position, as we see on the right of the painting, dressed entirely in white. Shade was another example of social prestige. The velarium was a type of awning that covered certain parts of the amphitheatre, protecting the elites from the sun and rain, while the rest of the populace was exposed to the elements. Thus we see how in the area at the back, left of the scene, the people are in full sun, while the patricians and other notable individuals enjoy the spectacle in the shade. Another sign of social distinction was clothing. White tunics were typical of the highest classes. Conversely, the rest of the populace wore rougher, less luxurious fabrics, often not as clean. Before we move on to the arena and continue with the analysis, I'd like to tell you about something special. On our website, I've compiled more than 300 historical paintings that you can have in your home. Each one comes with a story just as interesting as the one you're hearing in this video. You can choose from different finishes, including fine art print, gallery canvas, or framed canvas, so you can have a piece of art in your home that will last a lifetime. I have personally ensured that the reproduction is as faithful as possible to the original painting. I've also added new phone cases so you can protect your device and carry a piece of art in your pocket. I would love for you to visit the catalog once you finish watching the video and purchase your favorite painting. Shipping is free worldwide, and by placing an order, you will receive a lifetime piece of art while also supporting the channel, allowing us to continue making videos like this one. Regarding the arena, we see up to 4 gladiators, but in reality, there are only 2 protagonists, the Murmillo and the Retiarius. We can distinguish them by their attire. Standing tall, the imposing Murmillo wears a wide-brimmed helmet with a high crest resembling a fish fin. He typically wore a subligaculum, a type of loincloth, a Boltius belt, an ochria shin guard on his left leg, and a manica arm guard on his right arm. He fought with a scutum shield and a gladius sword, although the shield depicted by Gerome is not actually the one he used. In the arena, defeated is a Retiarius, recognizable by his subligaculum and the manica on his left arm. What identifies him most is the net and trident he used to defend himself, which we can see scattered across the arena. Lastly, let's pay attention to the gestures of the audience, with the thumbs down gesture traditionally interpreted as a symbol of death. Although it is still not entirely clear, the most accepted theory is that a thumbs down would mean life, indicating the sparing of the defeated, symbolizing the sheathed sword or the sword plunged into the ground. Conversely, a thumbs up would symbolize death, jugula, indicating the unsheathed sword plunged into the neck of the defeated. There are even theories suggesting that a horizontally extended finger would mean death, while a thumb tucked into the fist would signify life. This painting by Gerome is responsible for this misinterpretation, as it is not known what the fate of the Retiarius would be since the emperor has not yet given his verdict. This painting has so influenced popular imagination that Ridley Scott himself was inspired by it for some scenes in his famous movie Gladiator, including of course the thumb gesture. I'd love to know if you noticed this detail in the movie, and if so, you now know that the inspiration for this scene comes from this painting. Thank you very much for watching the video until the end. Don't forget to leave a like if you found it interesting, and subscribe so you don't miss out on 2 analyses like this every week. At inspiragio.com, you'll find the catalog to place your order, and my social media will be in the description if you want to see more art content. See you in the next video. Bye.